That's right. You can take the designer out of the hills, but you can't take the Billy out of the hills, right? I know. I should probably redo that joke. No, we'll leave it in. We'll leave it in. Welcome to Two Designers Walking Into a Bar.
A place where pop culture loving creatives
discover design icons that make us tick.
And we share a few cocktails in the process.
Yep. Everyone remembers their first time.
Today, we take a stroll down memory lane to revisit a particular typeface
and discuss how, no matter where we've seen it since,
we are reminded of the moment when our eyes first met.
So pop open a cold one,
dust off that old type specimen book, and grab a stool next to us at the bar.
Here we are, once again, Elliot, gathered around the virtual pub table.
Yes.
Looking around, you can say, hey, that person's just my type, right? But you don't know. You don't know what that person is because you're just kind of basing things on an impression that you have, right?
An impression. Wait.
Yeah.
I think I might know where you're going here.
All right. Go. Where are you going?
Well, type.
Yeah.
Impression.
Yeah. Yes, Robin. Figure it out.
Is it time to get the let out?
Oh, God, I love that. You're ragging that, aren't you?
Yeah, well, there's going to be a photo finish at some point.
That, exactly. This is, I can't think of a kerning joke, but obviously we're talking about typography.
I've seen your work. Some of your kerning is a joke.
Oh,
hey! Nerd alert.
No, really, I'll be here all week. Yes, today, what a great day we have. We're going to talk about something interesting with typography, but not in the typical nerd sense. Are we, Elliot?
Speak for yourself.
Okay, all right. No, we've got a good theme for today.
I think so.
All right. So what we're going to talk about your first time, Elliot.
You never forget it, do you?
We're going to talk about the first time you saw a particular typeface, an identifiable typeface. Let's say probably a display typeface because, you saw Helvetica the minute you were born. So let's talk about a display typeface. What do you remember seeing it on? Is that what you're here to talk about too, Elliot?
Oh, geez. Okay, well, hold on. Let me, I'm going to have to put away my Apple package collection here. And, yeah. Okay, yes. I think I can make that happen. I actually have in my back pocket here, I do happen to have a typeface that is near and dear to me. And Todd, I think you'll love it because my typeface involves a little bit of pseudo-Southern heritage.
Oh, okay. Well, let me see. There's so many there. It could be a log typeface that you would use on your moonshine business, right? Or,
yeah. Well, you know me and my moonshine business.
That's right.
I'm never holding still.
Oh, man. Did you look up a book of puns before joining today? Awesome.
I wrote the book of puns. Are you kidding me?
All right. Well, and I've got one for you that's actually done by a legit type designer, but it had a minute. It had its minute in a really sort of high period of artistic expression in the 1960s and 70s. It is much maligned and loved typeface.
I can't. Okay. So we're going to kind of get into a little bit of a battle here because I would argue do you want me to tip my hand? Do you want me to introduce my ugly date for the evening.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're trying to decide whose guest is more malign.
Yes. Who clears the room faster when they show up?
Who brought the stinkiest guest to the party?
Yeah. All right.
Yes, go for it.
All right, I'm gonna toss my hat in the ring here. So my typeface is a I won't say near and dear to my heart typeface, but it's one that is of my childhood. You know what, Todd? I feel to reveal the typeface, I almost want to tell you what the show is that I first encountered it in, because knowing your pedigree, I think you will nail this as soon as I give you the title of the show.
No, okay, all right, come on, man. Now,
all right,
that much of a Southerner?
Well, are you ready?
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Dukes of Hazzard?
Yeah, I know what it is. It's hobo typeface. Yes, okay, all right, yeah, you got me. All right, good.
Yep,
right.
yep. If the designer wasn't going to get it, the hillbilly would.
Well, you know, Elliot, while I may be an educated designer, at my heart, I am still a tried and true Southerner. And as you know, being here in the South, people move down here all the time for the beauty. But moving here doesn't make you a Southerner any more than a cat having kittens in an oven makes them biscuits.
Or I would argue a show being set in Georgia actually being filmed in Southern California.
Or you can take the bow out of the hoe, but you can't take the hoe out of the bow.
Sure.
All right, so, okay, we really strangled that pun.
It surrendered.
All right, so let's talk about this. So you're going to tell me a little bit about the typeface hobo. I have no idea where it began. I have no idea of its origin. I certainly am more familiar with Dukes of Hazzard. So tie those things together for me.
You mentioned being an educated designer. I myself am also an educated designer. Now, many people who have either met us in person, listened to this podcast, or both may disagree with that last statement. But I did not know until I started to look at type specimen books in college that hobo even had a lowercase alphabet. The only time I'd ever seen hobo was in the Dukes of Hazzard. And we will go ahead and post stills. We'll go ahead and post, I found the opening credits on YouTube. So we'll go ahead and post those because, you know, a few years ago they made a Dukes of Hazzard movie, but that was all slick. That was all uppity. That was not the Dukes of Hazzard I grew up with, Todd. That was not the Dukes of Hazzard you grew up with.
No.
And hobo was nowhere to be found, which was a profound disappointment for me.
What a crime that is.
Well, you know, sometimes the original is the best.
Yeah.
So anyway, I will post these credits, and you guys will see when you look at these that there is no lowercase anywhere. They just made the uppercase smaller when they wanted to de-emphasize the other stuff. But yeah, hobo, to me, that was the Dukes of Hazzard. Now, in the past, you talked about Kiss when we talked about 1976 and the phenomenon of Kiss. Now, around the time that you fell in love with Kiss was right around the time the Dukes of Hazzard was on TV. For me, in my life, right? I was about the same age, 9, 10. So it started in 1979 when I was 6, ended in 1985, so I would have been 12 or 13 years old. So the dual modern-day Robin Hoods, as they say, Todd. You know, these guys were on the right side of the law, but
just
the law,
a good old boy.
Yeah, but the law never treated him with any respect. Just like hobo doesn't get the respect I think it deserves, right?
No, hobo has no Uncle Jesse or Cooter
Heck
to
no.
rely on.
Heck no. Certainly nothing as beautiful as Daisy.
That's right, Daisy Dukes. You know, I bet people don't even know now that term for those types of shorts originated with the Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah, it's well, let's just
I think
say
you should post pictures of that too.
Well, let's just say it's good that I'm alone right now as we're recording this and we're talking about
right,
Daisy. Good. At any rate, just to get back on track here, I got distracted for a minute, reliving my adolescence. Hobo. So hobo came along long before the Duke Boys. It was designed by Morris Fuller Benton for American type founders back in 1910. And then 5 years later, there was a lighter weight. So, display faces were used in all kinds of ads. And Hobo was kind of this quirky woodcut looking typeface. It just looked hand carved. It was really strange. No straight lines in it. As I mentioned earlier, there was a lowercase alphabet that I was unaware of at the time. But you know what? It turns out it didn't even matter because they could have used the lowercase because even though they're lowercase characters, there are no descenders with the lowercase.
Because it's a hobo, damn it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You play by your own rules. You live your life the way you want to live it.
Just a good old boy.
That's right. So, Benton, if you guys don't know Hobo, I guarantee if you are a designer of any worth when it comes to your affection for typefaces, you will know some of this guy's greatest hits. We could be here for the next hour listing the things this guy has created, but I will narrow it down to 4. Century Schoolbook, Bank Gothic, Franklin Gothic, and Garamond 3.
Whoa. Yeah. The real deal.
Yeah.
And Hobo.
And, Hobo goes without saying. I mean, if this guy probably typeset his whole resume in Hobo.
I would.
I would too.
Yeah, I would.
The interesting thing that he did, in addition, of course, to really bringing the Dukes of Hazzard out of the hollers and into the mainstream. You see what I did there? That was my southern, I
did,
So,
it didn't sound quite right with you saying that, though. But
I know. I apologize to everybody.
Good try, Biscuit.
Thanks. I appreciate that. He pioneered the concept of typeface families in different sizes and weights while he was working as the chief type designer for American Type Foundry for 37 years. Other people had sort of done it sporadically over the years, but he was really the first one. It wasn't Adobe. It wasn't House Industries, apologizing to House and to Jonathan Heffler and Tobias Frere Jones and all these other folks who are folk
Fantastic
heroes.
Foundries.
100%. So, but this was the first guy to really crack that code. So the big mystery here, though, is why the name Hobo? Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, sure, it's this little sort of ramshackle typeface. It's kind of, when you see it, you'll say, yeah, Hobo, that fits. It turns out there are a few competing theories around this. And it's a mystery. No one truly knows the answer, as it turns out. So, the first theory is that it came from a story that it was sketched in the early 1900s, sent to the foundry nameless, like it just kind of, hey, would you be interested in me creating this face for you? And it just hung around. No one was an advocate for it within the type foundry, just sort of lingered. And it was called that old hobo. It was this old kind of half-baked design that was always hanging around, kind of this albatross, right? So it was the hobo. It was the itinerant fellow, the gentleman of the road who would not go away. Then, another idea, the typeface originally was not even called Hobo. It was originally called Adface, believe it or not, which doesn't really roll off the tongue and doesn't sound nearly as fun as you can imagine that this Hobo does. So it was finally patented in 1915. I mentioned there was a second version of the typeface called Light Hobo. So that's the hobo that doesn't
got his shit together. Right?
Yeah, well, I would say he probably shits more often than his more heavy-set friend, if he's the light hobo. So, he got a hold of a bag of Olestra chips or, something. I'm not sure exactly.
That's a separate story, my friend.
Yeah,
Don't bring it up.
I'm sorry. My new nickname for you, Todd, is Light Hobo.
Oh, okay, thanks. That's good.
One of the theories here is the prevailing bow-legged shape of the letter forms. And again, if you look at this, you'll know we'll post, obviously, reference to this on our website. But that the bow-legged shape of the letter forms inspired another theory that it was named because it looked like a hobo's bow legs, right?
Yeah,
This guy tooling around town. But there really probably is a more benign, but I would argue equally interesting theory. And that is Benton lived and worked near a large Russian community. And apparently there was a cigar poster that was advertising to this population. In this poster, there was a word that looked like hobo. So hobo, or a word very similar to it in Russian, means new. So, it's like, hey, there's this new cigar out there, hobo. And the reason that people tie this typeface and this name back to that poster, in addition to that word, is that apparently a letter O that was used in the poster almost exactly matches the O that later appeared in Hobo. And when I say almost matched, like you could take a tracing of it, slap it on this original poster, and it matches. So it could very well be that, again, if you think about our underappreciated Unsung Logos podcast episode, you had this unsung hero that maybe put together a few of these characters and just went about his business, finished his cigar poster project. Then Benton comes along, sees this letter form, a spark fires, and he decides, hey, this could really go somewhere. And I really feel that this goes back to something, Todd, that you and I have repeatedly returned to in our episodes, which is that all designers are always standing on the shoulders of others, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mining pop culture, looking at the built environment, seeing things that are right at your fingertips. And this is, in my opinion, just another example of that. Enough about me, enough about Hobo. Let's jump into your memory.
All right, so I don't think I caught. Did you tell me the date around when Hobo was developed?
The lighter weight was released in 1915, but the original Hobo was 1910. So it's 110 years old. I mean, this is not a new typeface. But the good news is, it was certainly around before 1979. Certainly
That's true.
around.
That's right. Yeah.
Certainly around before the show that was second only in ratings to Dallas at one point on CBS debuted.
Wow. Hi, while we have your attention, if you want to learn more about us and the podcast, there are a few ways to do it.
Visit our website at twodesignerswalkintoabar.com. All of that is spelled out. No numbers.
Kind of a long URL, so do yourself a favor and bookmark it. Once you're there, you can find links to more information about the subjects in this episode, our episode archive, and information about both of us.
Wait, we do want people to visit, right?
Well, and look for us on social media. You can find those links on our website as well.
And while we're at it, if you have a friend who you feel will dig on our rambling,
tell him or her what we're up to.
While we can't guarantee that they will remain your friend, we can guarantee that they will listen to at least 30 seconds of whatever episode you send them the link to.
That's being a little shameless.
And speaking of being shameless, it wouldn't be a proper ask if we didn't mention that if you like what you hear, you can also make a donation via our website. We have a Nigerian prince handling all transactions for us.
In fact, he told us to mention that we have stickers to mail to anyone who donates $10 or more. Are we done?
We're done.
We're done. Okay, so both of our dates with good personalities that we're bringing to the bar tonight,
yes,
they share some similarities. Both were born around that time period.
Back in 1910. You know, Todd, without going any further, I think this proves we both like older women.
So I never did let on the exact typeface that I'm talking about, but I did tell you it was designed by a pretty famous type designer out of Chicago.
The band Chicago?
No, not exactly. Not exactly. It was released in, there's a little bit of discrepancy in the times, but let's just say 1920, 1922. Mm-hmm. It was drawn. It was a version of another typeface that this guy had created, famous letterer. You might know him, the Great Oz. Does that sound like anybody you know? That's right, Oswald Cooper. Cooper Black is what we're talking about.
I love it. I adore Cooper Black.
Of course, if you look up ironic in the designer's fancy dictionary, you would see that it's written in Cooper Black because people love it or don't love it. it has been used in some incredibly sublime uses and then some really janky ones too. But let me tell you a little bit about how I was exposed to this. First of all,
Yes.
so back, I don't know, probably it was in the 70s, sometime late 70s, my parents bought me these giant cork letters so I could pin stuff to them on my wall, and they happened to be letters in Cooper Black, which is cool. I didn't know that, right? I had no idea that there were even these styles of typefaces. I just was happy enough that I could recognize the letter C in one of them. So I realized at the time that that was the same type style as some titles to some of their records. Again, this was sort of the 70s. Things like the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, Neil Diamond's Greatest Hits, you know, some Simon and Garfunkel there. So I started kind of connecting these things here, which I thought was kind of cool. I noticed that it matched those letters on the albums, and also one of my personal favorites, the packaging for Sea Monkeys, too.
Oh, yeah, love that.
Yeah, and speaking of TV shows, Different Strokes.
Yes.
So Cooper Black, for me, it represented this range of awesome. Everything from Pet Sounds to some of my pet sea monkeys. And I could draw it. Here's what's cool about that. So as I said, it was designed by Oswald Bruce Cooper, and it was released by the Barnhart Brothers and Spindler Type Foundry in 1922, and it was designed as an extra bold weight of Cooper Old Style family. And, you know, it's fine. It kind of bumped along. It's fat. It's chunky. It's known for these sort of rounded bottoms, these curved bottoms that were forgiving if you had sort of bad type setting. So the baseline didn't always have to line up. It sort of still worked because there were no flat edges on the bottom. Now, flash forward and technology advancements, movable type, phototype started kind of getting to be a thing in the late 50s, and it allowed us to start squeezing letters together even more tightly, so the kerning would become even super tight. And Oz Cooper thought that that's where Cooper Black looked its best, was when it was like jammed together in tight letter spacing and tight kerning. But phototype, obviously, of that period was starting to allow us to do those kind of things, which was cool. It's giving us some more freedom.
So let's for some of the listeners, let's define maybe what phototype is, just super duper quickly, and why now there's this freedom that wasn't there before.
Okay, so up until then, letters had to be created either in wood in the early stages or in metal type, and you had to set every letter of every word using individual pieces of metal or wood back in the day. And because they were real blocks, they were real chunks, they couldn't get but so close together. So with the technological advent of phototype, we could then squish the letters, more tightly kern them better together.
Because they were on film at that point, it was a film positive
Right.
or film negative. So the only thing was light had to pass through it, so you could layer things on top of each other, right?
Right. But the real kind of interesting thing that happened here at the crossroads of sort of the mid-1960s was what you and I know as the start of the desktop revolution. This giant step forward happened in the 60s when software became available, which allowed different typefaces to be available, and users, typesetters, operators were working on CRT screens, which gave the typesetter even more freedom to express themselves with different typefaces. So no doubt Hobo was kicking it back then as well, and Cooper Black became a great representation of the time because it was fat, it was chunky, it got attention, right? This happened to also coincide with the explosion of expression that happened in the 1960s and 70s. So think about things like band flyers or protest signs, and as I said before, album covers. So many album covers at that time were set with Cooper Black. It became a sign of the times. It became identifiable as part of that generation, part of that artistic expression.
It's so funny that you mentioned this, because when I was doing some of my research for this episode, I found a lot of flyers and book covers and things like that that were actually set in both Cooper Black and Hobo. Apparently,
Wow.
these guys have been roommates for a long time.
Yeah, apparently that's like some kind of unholy duo, right? Or superhero duos, I guess.
We don't know if it's Thor and Loki, or if it's more like the Wonder Twins.
That's right. Okay, so let me talk about my impression of it. Obviously, it was kind of everywhere at a period of time, and it's so part of the culture. But again, a thing that was really an important use of it was Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. And everybody knows this record. It was released in 1966, May 16th, 1966, which was about a year after Brian Wilson had decided to stop touring with the band. He was having some, air quotes, issues. So decided for the band to go out on tour. He would stay holed up in the studio and make masterpieces. So this freedom from touring allowed him to really get into the studio, use the studio for artistic expression. He could record endlessly. He could twiddle knobs endlessly. The great thing, I mentioned sort of the technology advances of photo typesetting, but also recording technology was also advancing at a rapid rate. Now, the third part of this intersection, of this crossroads, if you will, was drug use. So around the mid-'60s, obviously, drug use was becoming more apparent. LSD and marijuana, certainly with recording artists, and Brian Wilson was no different.
Todd, I actually saw a documentary about Brian Wilson during this time when he was sort of separating from the band. And from what I recall, he actually had there were some mental issues happening. I mean, and not even trying to sound funny by saying that. He was starting to get sick. And if I remember, one of the symptoms when he or other people started knowing things were going wrong, and I think this goes to the drug use, the idea of self-medicating, was during this time when he was in the studio and playing music, wasn't he having auditory hallucinations?
Yes. I mean, why else would you use a theremin on a record, right, Elliot?
Well, if a UFO is landing, you use a theremin.
Good point. Now I know how I can break out my theremin. Clearly, yes. He had some issues which had kept him from touring and allowed him to really focus on making music that broke new ground. So then Pet Sounds was released of the time, as I said, in 1966, and it's widely known that Pet Sounds influenced the Beatles to create Sgt. Pepper.
There was an arms race, for those of you who don't know, between the Beatles and the Beach Boys.
Yes, yeah. So if you think about it, like that period, Pet Sounds followed by Sgt. Pepper, which was the reaction from the Beatles, that was sort of the big bang of pop culture. That represents the 1960s. And we can say Cooper Black was there to tell us about it.
Oh, I will also give you another example from my childhood that is still on the air today.
Ooh.
Yeah, all these years later. And Todd, I'm about to give you a hint. Are you ready?
Okay.
Yep. Close your eyes.
Okay, eyes closed.
Imagine you're like 15 years old and you're sitting in front of the television.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. 3.
No. Yes. That's what Cooper Black tastes like. Tootsie Pops.
Yes, 100% it tastes like Tootsie Pops.
That's
Are
right.
you kidding me?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and I'm going to ask you the same question. Like, when I think of Cooper Black, now obviously I taste Tootsie Pops or Tootsie Rolls. I see in-your-face advertising. I see TV shows like MASH or Bob Newhart. and I hear the sounds of a clavinet or a theremin, or
Okay.
a theremin, right?
Yes,
Tell
or
me,
both. I mean,
or
how
both,
amazing
a
would that be?
clavinet playing a theremin. So, what does hobo taste like, Elliot?
Ooh, corn pone.
Corn pone and salt. What sound does hobo make, Elliot?
Hobo. The voice of Hobo is Waylon Jennings.
Just a good old boy.
The
Yeah.
balladeer, man. The guy
Yeah.
who narrated all of the episodes of the Dukes of Hazzard along with singing his theme song for
That's
it.
right. So, okay, so what lasting impressions do you have from Hobo and the Dukes of Hazzard?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, I don't think a card in the General Lee with a giant rebel battle flag could probably be on television today.
Don't think it would pass standards and practices today.
Pass muster. But
No.
30 years ago, I had the whole Erdl, I imagine that's how you would pronounce that company's name. I had all of the Matchbox cars. I read that there were 12 General Lees on the original show.
Yeah.
Because they were all getting smashed up all the time with all the stunts. I wanted to be a stunt car driver when I was little, when I wasn't going to be an NFL quarterback.
Yeah.
I wanted to totally be the guy who got paid to jump an orange car over a river, over police cars, over the bad guys from the big city of Atlanta. Whatever it took, man. I was all about that. So I had several General Lee models that I would put
Wow.
together, and then I'd, smash them up because they got smashed up on the show. But to me, to this day, probably, I'm not suggesting I get Hobo as the typeface on my tombstone, but if, the last thing I look at is Hobo, it will still remind me of the Dukes of Hazzard. That is that typeface to me.
Because even though you're from the Midwest, Elliot, you're just a good old boy.
I'm not I'm not harming anybody.
No, you're just a good old boy.
I'm misunderstood.
You're rounding the curves, aren't you?
I'm straightening the hills.
No, straightening the curves. Sorry.
Flattening the hills. Come
Flattening
on,
the
man.
hills. I know, sorry.
Todd, it's official. Turn your card in. You're no longer a Southerner.
Card in. I know. I can still name the actors though. Tom
Yeah.
Snyder.
John Schneider, Tom Woppett,
John
Catherine
Snyder,
Bach.
Tom Woppett, and Denver Pyle. Love Denver Pyle.
Yep,
Oh my
yep,
God,
yep.
love Denver Pyle.
And who played Roscoe?
Oh man, I can't think of his name. But both Denver Pyle and the character that played Roscoe were on Andy Griffith.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And what was Roscoe's dog? The name of his dog? Oh, okay.
man.
You ready for my impression?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go Flash!
That was awesome. I closed my eyes and I thought Roscoe was here. Now, there was a cooter in the show too, right?
Yeah, he was the mechanic. Yeah.
And Catherine Bach.
Yeah, they were. Well, you know what? I'm going to leave that alone because the 14 listeners we do have, I at least want to still have 12 listeners when this episode's over.
That's right. I may have lost some there. Sorry about that.
So, Todd, what are we joke about Tootsie Roll and some of these other things. What other, if any, lasting impressions do you have about Cooper Black? So, if it were like a flashcard and I just, that corked C, like if I just had a giant uppercase C of Cooper Black and I flashed that in front of you real quick, what would be the first thing to pop into your head?
So clearly it was of the time, right? It's used now, ironically, if we want to be more retro, but from sort of the 60s and 70s, it definitely represented artistic, technology, and civil advancement. And to me, Cooper Black was both the cause and the result of that. As I said before, it represents kind of those things all coming together, and it was in your face. It's actually, and we're going to post this link too on the website. There's a great video by Vox called That Font Is Everywhere. It's actually pretty well designed, although it certainly has its minutes, but it's certainly well designed, bold, fat, in your face, great for advertising. So I will always remember it as being adventurous, as being bold, as sort of opening the doors to artistic expression, and really kind of yelling at me a little bit with the sound of a theremin and a clavinet.
Geez, I guess I win the Low Culture Award this week because it just reminds me of a TV show. You know, my typeface. So you win this round, Todd Coates. But I'll be back. I will be back.
One of us always has to be lowbrow. One has to be highbrow. I really thought, with these two typefaces today, we both were going to drive through the neighborhood of lowbrow.
I was going to say, if we both drove through the neighborhood of highbrow at the same time, everybody would look out their windows and know something's up.
That's right. They would be moving out of the neighborhood.
And then you know who'd be following us?
Who?
Roscoe. Well, Todd, it was a pleasure as always. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I can't wait to do this again.
Absolutely. Thanks, Elliot. Thanks to our 12 listeners out there. Tell a friend if you want to really make them like a lifelong friend about us.
No, I would say get a tattoo of one of your initials in Cooper Black and the other initial in Hobo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then on your body, those two typefaces are now lifelong friends.
Just a good old boy.